Civil 3D allows you to add boundaries to a surface. The types of boundaries that you can add are outer, show, hide, or data clip. An outer boundary is used to bound the entire surface. However, the surface data outside the boundary is still technically in the drawing. A hide boundary would be used to hide an area that you do not want to triangulate, such as a pond, a building, etc. A show boundary is used to show the inside of a hide boundary, but can also be used to show render materials. A data clip boundary will actually remove the surface data outside the boundary from the drawing, and is very useful if you are using point files to create your surface, as the actual point file data will not be included in the drawing. So let's go ahead and zoom into our building area, which is at the end of our roadway, towards the beginning of the bridge here. And let's say we want to hide the contours within this building, as they are not necessary. So we'll expand our surfaces category, go to the EG surface, expand definition, and right-click on the boundaries category and select add. Always a good idea to give it a name, so we'll just say building. And in this case, this will be a hide boundary. But notice the different options available. When non-destructive break lines is turned on, it will actually allow the triangulation to occur right to the boundary, even if data does not exist next to that boundary. If you toggle this off, it will only use the data inside the surface. So we'll toggle this on, as we do want it to triangulate to the actual building line itself. The mid-ordinate distance is useful for curved data. It'll add tighter triangles and make a more accurate surface. I'll click OK, and I'll simply select my figure, press enter, and just like that, it has created a hide boundary where the contours will not display, nor will the triangles. Let's go ahead and bound our entire surface. So let's say we only want to deal with the roadway on this side of the surface. I already have a predefined boundary object, which is just a 2D polyline. And that's what makes this functionality really cool, is you actually do not need a 3D polyline or a 3D object. You can simply use a 2D object and it'll automatically triangulate to that object using the surface elevations. I'll press escape to clear my selection set. I'll right click on boundaries, select add, and we'll call this one exterior boundary. This is a outer boundary. And in this case, we'll toggle off non-destructive, so it'll only use the data within the actual surface. I'll change my mid-ordinate distance to 0.5 to make it a little tighter around curves and so on. Click OK. I'll zoom in and select my object. And notice how the actual triangulation does not go to the actual exterior boundary object. It goes to the closest surface data that's in the actual surface. And just like that, we have bound the surface. Note, the information is still in the file, and we could unbound the surface by simply deleting it or turning it off in the surface properties, which we will discuss later on. This concludes this video discussing adding boundaries to a surface. Surface properties allow you to change many of the settings and order of operations within a surface. To access the surface properties, there are a few ways. One way is to select the surface first, and you'll get a contextual ribbon with all the different commands and options that you would want for that surface. So here's the surface properties in the Modify panel. I can simply click here, and just going through the different tabs, in the Information tab, you can change the styles. So if you quickly and easily want to just see the, let's say, triangles, I can click Apply, and notice how the triangles appear because that style is telling Civil 3D how to display that surface. Let's go ahead and change it back to the contours. If you have a render material of some sort, you can change that in here as well. The Definition tab is where you define all the build data operations and where all the history of your surface creation is contained. This is one of the great things about creating surfaces in Civil 3D. It records every surface definition that you've done for that surface. For instance, the boundary that we selected in the boundaries video, the building boundary that we also added as well, and any of the other operations that you've done within this surface. As I mentioned before, one of the main reasons to actually add descriptions is that you can actually see the descriptions within the parameters column here, and you can make decisions as to whether or not you want to turn these on or off. For instance, let's say we want to turn the boundary off just to include the entire surface. I can simply toggle this, click Apply, it'll rebuild the surface for me, and just like that, I now have the rest of my surface available. You can toggle on and off any of the operations as well as change the order. So if you are not getting the desired results of a triangulation, simply change the order of the different operations and I can guarantee you, you will get the surface results that you need. One of the other options available is the build options. You can tell Civil 3D that you do not want to include elevations less than 0 or greater than by a certain value. You can also define a maximum angle defined between adjacent tins, which will avoid having any sliver-looking type triangles. You can also define a maximum triangle length. So let's say I'll say yes to this and define a value of 100 foot. So I will not have a triangle length more than 100 feet, which can delete automatically the long triangle edges that you usually get at intersections and so on. I'll click Apply, Rebuild, and notice how just like that, those have been removed. Again, if I set this to No, it simply turns it off, and I'm back to the original surface creation. There's also some data operations that you can turn on or off, as well as any of the edit operations that you want to turn on or off. The Analysis tab is used for doing surface analysis like elevations, contours, directions, slope arrows, and so on. This will be discussed in another video. And the Statistics tab is where the properties and statistics of this surface are easily accessible. You can see things like the 2D surface area, the 3D surface area, and so on. If you'd like to copy any of these settings in here, simply right-click in here, copy to clipboard. I'll cancel out of this, and I can do a Control-V or a paste, and there's all my surface properties. And of course, you can edit this text to get the property that you wanted. This concludes this video on surface properties. Most surface edits are done by selecting the surface and choosing the appropriate surface edit from the contextual ribbon. However, before performing some surface edits, you must create a style or have a style that displays the triangles and points of the surface. So let's go ahead and create one. Let's go to the Settings tab, Surface Category, Surface Styles Collection, and there is one that's existing here called Contours and Triangles. Let's go ahead and copy it, and we'll create one called Tin Editing. Right-click on the Contours and Triangles surface style and select Copy from the shortcut menu. Let's go to the Information tab first, and because I want this to be up top, I can actually put this with an exclamation point. That's a cool little trick. And we'll call this one Tin_Editing. The only tab that we're concerned with is the Display tab because we want the points and triangles and the border to be turned on in Model and Plan View. So while in this Plan View, I can make this dialog box a little bigger. And I'm going to select all by just holding down the Shift key. And I'll first turn all of these off. And then I'll select points, triangles, and border. And then I can turn the display of both those subcomponents on. I can also do that in the model view. And in this case, I'll just click that light bulb. And now I have those on in both views. I'll click OK. And there's our new surface style. So let's go ahead and apply that surface style to our surface. I'll first select it. And you can do this in the surface properties, but a much faster and easier way is to go to the properties palette and just simply change the style to the one that we just created. Now, while I still have the surface selected, I'm going to zoom in and I want to delete these erroneous triangles as the triangulation data should be removed from the surface. So in the Edit Surface dropdown, here are all the Edit Surface options. We want the Delete Line option. Notice how I'm in select mode, so there are a few things to remember whenever you are in a select mode option. You can always just select an object like so, and I'll press enter, but don't forget about the selection assist tools like fence for F. So if I type F and then enter, I can do a fence selection like that. And then press enter when you're done with your fence selection, and then enter again to remove the triangles. Another option that a lot of people forget about is the WP and CP options as well. So if I type in CP, that stands for crossing polygon. I can go into here and just make a crossing polygon very easily, press enter, and then I'm done. We'll do fence again here, and so on. And that's how you delete lines or triangle edges within a Civil 3D surface. Let me press escape, and while I still have the surface selected, let's go ahead and look at the surface properties. Because one of the really cool things about doing any kind of the surface edits is the fact that anything that you do will be stored in the Definition tab. So as you can see here, if I ever make a mistake or if I need to bring back some sort of triangulation, I can always simply toggle off the ones that I don't want or change the order of them to get the desired triangulation results and simply click OK or Apply, and the surface will rebuild with either those edits removed or updated. This concludes this video discussing editing surface lines. Most surface edits are done by selecting the surface and choosing the appropriate surface edit from the contextual ribbon. we will look at editing, removing, and adding surface points, not to be confused with Civil 3D, Kogo, or survey points. Let me go ahead and select the surface, and we already have a surface style that does enable us to do any kind of surface editing, especially with points. But let's go ahead and discuss where the surface point display is actually controlled. I will go to the contextual ribbon, and I'll go to the Modify panel, and then in the Surface Properties dropdown, I'll go to the Edit Surface Style command. So the Points tab is where you change the display or control the display of the actual surface point. So this is not to be confused with a Civil 3D Kogo point, which is controlled by the point style. So notice how I can change the display mode to use the surface elevation or exaggerate it. I can also change it to absolute units as far as the size goes, or have it scale automatically. Most probably you want to just keep it at the same size and not have it scale automatically. However, the default 3 feet is typically a little bit too large, so I'll just change this to 1.5. You can also change the symbol that appears for the point. And this just uses the regular AutoCAD point symbols, and you can select the one that you prefer. I'm going to go ahead and pick this one here. You can change the color and so on of it, but in general, you can just keep it to be by layer. Click OK, and that will now update the symbol for the point that surfaces will display. Let's go ahead and zoom to the lower part of our surface where we have a few crown points. Let's say we want to add some points to interpolate them and get tighter triangulation. I'll select my surface, and then in the contextual ribbon, I will pick the Edit Surface dropdown and select Add Point from the dropdown. I will snap to the midpoint of this triangle, and when I do so, notice how the elevation immediately comes up, the current elevation of that surface. And so if I want that elevation, I can simply hit Enter, or I could type a new value in if I wanted to. I'll hit Enter. Notice how the triangles appear automatically. So this is a quick and easy way to simply add some additional triangulation points to tighten up your triangulation. Once you're done, press Escape, and that's it for the surface points. Let's say I want to edit a surface point. So as I zoom in here, let's say the surveyor made a mistake and came back to me and said, you know, the elevation at 0.788 is really 102.9. So I could edit the survey point or the Kogo point, but instead of doing so, if let's say I don't have access to the survey database because I can't change that elevation because it's locked to the survey database, I can simply edit the surface point. Note, if you change the surface point, it will not update the Kogo point and vice versa. Even if you rebuild the survey point that it's reading from with the elevation that it initially had. I'll select my surface again, go to Edit Surface, Modify Point, and I'll pick my point, press Enter. Notice how it tells you the elevation, and now I want to type in the 102.9. Press Enter, hit Escape, and if I hover for a second, you'll see that my elevation is 102.9. You can also remove points, as you probably saw in that drop down there. Removing points is very easy. Let's say I want to remove this random shot. I can simply select the surface, Edit Surface, Delete Point, and then select the surface point, and press Enter. Notice how the retriangulation occurs, and that's it. One of the great things, as mentioned before, about these surface edits is that they're stored in the Surface Properties dialog box. So in the definition, you will see all of the edits that you have made to your surfaces. If you want to remove one or temporarily turn it off, you could simply toggle it off, click Apply, and rebuild the surface. Or if you want to permanently remove it, and there's no undo of this when you exit the file and come back in, you can right-click, Remove from Definition, and it will permanently remove that surface edit from the definition. This concludes this video discussing editing surface points.